is today's word. This is today's word.
This is the Today's Word podcast with Rick Pina.
Hello, good morning. This is Rick Pina and I bring you today's word for October 19th, 2017. I've been teaching a series entitled As Jesus Is, and this is part 61. As Jesus Is, part 61. We've been looking at 1 John 4, verses 16 and 17 for months, and then I've been adding different passages to it. Right now, we're looking at, along with 1 John 4, 16 and 17, Colossians chapter 1, verses 24 through 27. So let's look at our passages this morning. So in 1 John 4, this is what the Apostle John said. And we as believers have known and believe the love God has for us. Not just know it, but we believe it. So God is love. He that dwells in love dwells in God, and God dwells in him. Now herein is the love of God made perfect. This is what happens when the love of God is made perfect in our heart, when we believe the love, right? He says that when we really believe the love of God, we can stand before God on the day of judgment with boldness, knowing that as Jesus is, so are we in this world. All of the righteousness that was on Jesus is on us. So we can actually stand before God on the day of judgment with boldness, knowing that as he is, so are we. And we are like Jesus in this world. So in Colossians chapter 1, Paul says this. He says, listen, guys, I am happy in my sufferings for you. Now, there is much that Christ must still suffer, and I gladly accept my part in those sufferings in my body for the good of his body, the church. I became a servant of the church because God gave me a special assignment. This work helps you. My work is to tell the complete gospel, the message that is the secret truth that was hidden from the beginning for ages. It was hidden from God's people from the beginning, from ages, but now it has been revealed to God's holy people. God decided to let his people know just how rich and glorious this truth is. This secret is, this mystery is, which is for all people. And then he says, okay, well, here it is. You ready for the mystery? Here's the mystery. Christ lives in you, and he is our hope for glory. Here's the mystery. If you're born again, Christ lives in you, and he is the hope that we have for the glory of God to be manifested in our lives. And so as I was meditating that this morning, because I was looking at yesterday I focused in on this statement, and I was looking at it to go back to it today. I was looking at the statement where Paul said, I'm happy in my sufferings for you, and there's much that Christ must still suffer, and I gladly accept my part in those sufferings in my body for the good of his body, which is the church. As I was meditating on that, the Lord led me over to 2 Corinthians chapter 10. And 2 Corinthians chapter 12. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 8 through 10, I'm going to read this to you from the Message Bible. This is what happens. Paul was up against a tremendous challenge, and he asked God to take the challenge away. He even asked God to take it away 3 times. And God said, no, I'm not going to do it that way. Instead of giving you less challenge, which is what we all ask for, right? I mean, God, why is this happening to me? Can you take it away from me? Instead of giving us less challenge, well, God said, no, Paul, I'm not going to give you less challenge. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you more grace. So instead of removing the challenge, you got to acknowledge the fact that I've already given you the grace, and you have the grace to overcome the challenge. So my grace is sufficient for you. And that's what you need to acknowledge. I never promised to take away problems. I never promised to take away opposition. I never promised to take away challenges, but I did promise to give you the grace. So now you face whatever you have to face. You just don't have to face it alone because I am in you. So let's look at that from Paul's own words. So this is the way the Apostle Paul said it. He says, man, I begged God to remove this thing. And I begged him to remove it 3 times. And then this is what God told me. He said, my grace is enough. My grace is all you need. My strength comes into his own actually in your weakness. Paul says, once I heard that, I was glad to let it happen. I quit focusing on the handicap and I began to appreciate the gift. It was a case of Christ's strength moving in on my weakness. Now I take limitations in stride. I take them with good cheer. These limitations that cut me down to size, abuse, accidents, opposition, bad breaks, when all these bad things, because bad things do happen to good people, when all these bad things are happening to me, he says, I just let Christ take over. So when all these bad things are happening to me, I just let Christ take over. And then Paul said this, and so the weaker I get in my humanity, the stronger I become in my divinity. See, there's a human side to you and there's a divine side to you. And so the weaker you get in your humanity, you're up against opposition. You know, people are coming up against you strong. People are talking about you. Every whatever project you're on, it doesn't seem like it's winning. So now you have a choice. Do I continue to struggle in my flesh, or do I let the power of God come in? And so at that point, he says, the weaker I get, the stronger I become, because I'm not the one doing it. He could say, like Jesus said in John 14:10, it's the Father living in me. He gives me the words and he performs the work. So what does this mean to you today on this particular day? I have 5 things to share with you that I believe are going to help you no matter what you're facing this morning. Here we go. Number 1, living as Jesus is in this world does not mean you're not going to face opposition. Actually, it may mean that you're going to face more opposition than you have ever imagined. Because remember, they persecuted Jesus. And Jesus said, well, the servant is not greater than the master. If they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. So just like they came up against Jesus, they're going to come up against you. But here it is. But the gospel is you're not going to have to face it alone. You have Jesus in you. You are already equipped to face and overcome every challenge on the road to the fulfillment of your purpose. Number 2, when you acknowledge the fact that Christ is in you and you realize that you already have all it takes. You have all it takes. You have been gifted with all it takes. You've been equipped with all it takes. You've been anointed with all it takes. You already have it. It's not something you're going to have. It's something you already have. The New Testament is not about things that we're striving for. The New Testament is about acknowledging what we already have. So when you realize that you already have all it takes to become the man, the woman that God called you to be from the foundations of the world, that you already have all it takes to accomplish the assignment that you were sent to this planet to accomplish. When you realize you already have all it takes because Christ is in you, then you start to let him out, and it's for all the world to see. Number 3, Paul learned that God's power, his grace, is made perfect in our weakness. Now, what this means, look at me for a minute, because this is important what I'm about to say. What this means is that God will not compete with you. If you want to attempt to do everything on your own, then go ahead. God is going to stand by and watch you struggle. Now, if you work in your humanity, then God is going to rest. But if you realize that you can't do it, if you acknowledge the fact that God has called you to things that called you to do things that exceed your power, your ability, your strength, if you yield to him, then at that point, God's power will kick in where your submission opened the door. Let me say that again. The power of God is available, but it can't flow when you're in the way. So God's power will kick in where your submission opened the door. So you must submit to him. You open the door. You yield to him. Because if you don't, if you're the one doing it, if you work, God's going to rest. But if you learn to rest, to enter into God's rest, then God will work, and he will work in you, with you, and through you. Number 4, Paul taught us about a great mystery. Here's the mystery. He said in our text, Christ lives in you. There is a God living on the inside of you. But this God honors you so much that he will not get involved unless you ask him to. His grace will not flow unless you yield to him. His power will not be manifested unless you die to self and get out of the way. So watch this. You have a God living on the inside of you, but he's not going to be seen. Or let me ask it this way. Could it be that you're walking around with a God inside of you and he is not being seen in you, with you, through you, because there's too much of you in the way? So that's why the Bible teaches us to die to self, to yield to him. Number 5, and finally, the purpose of learning that God is a living God and that he is living inside of you, and the point of seeing yourself as Jesus is in this world, is so that you could yield to him, so that you could allow God to be manifested through you. God's strength is only made perfect in our weakness. When you can't, he can. When it's bigger than you, it's smaller than him. When it exceeds your resources, then believe me, it certainly does not exceed his. So you must learn to live with the God who is in you, and then learn to allow him to do what you can't, to say what you don't even know, and to manifest his glory in your life for all the world to see. This is what it means to declare and believe, as Jesus is, so am I in this world. Let's close this message out with a declaration of faith. I want you to repeat after me in faith from a believing heart. Say this and say it out loud. Say it in faith. Say, Father, this is a year of great victory for me. You live in me, and I am determined to let you out. Now, there was a time in my life where there was too much of me in the way, so you could not be seen. But I declare that those days are over. I die to me. I yield to you. Your strength is made perfect in my weakness. When I can't, you can. When it's bigger than me, it's smaller than you. When I don't have the resources, you have already made provision. So I learned to walk with you and allow you to manifest your glory through me. So I boldly declare, as Jesus is, so am I in this world. I declare this by faith. In Jesus' name, amen. This is today's word. Apply it and prosper. If you're not getting these messages, go to todaysword.org, look on the right-hand side of the website, sign up, get the messages. It's going to be a blessing to you. If you're watching this on Facebook Live or YouTube or live stream, share this on your timeline. Share this with your friends. Leave me some comments. I like reading the comments. I read them all. So as you enter this day, just remember, you already have the grace for it. No matter what you're facing, you don't have to face it alone. You have a God living on the inside of you. Go and live as Jesus is in this world. God bless you.